Hello and welcome back to Seconds Out. My name is Ayman Khan. I'm here again with one of my favorite people to speak to, not just because of his dulcet tones, but also for his finger on the pulse of sport, Kevin Barry. Kevin, how you doing, sir?
Eamon, I'm doing great and terrific, mate, to be talking with you. And I know this week you and I have had a few complications trying to hook up with each other, but I'm pleased we're here now, my friend, and great to see you.
Great to see you too. Before we get into our chat, 39 years ago, almost to the day, you had your hand raised against the incomparable Evander Holyfield. Not in the way that you would have wanted to get the win, but that's
Right.
history, as they say. What are your memories of that day?
Look, it was just, and I was actually really surprised when my son Taylor brought it to my attention a couple of days ago. He said, "Dad, you know what today is?" I went, "No, mate, not really." And he goes, "It's 39 years since you fight with the Evander Holyfield." I went, "Wow!" So he actually said to me, "God, you've got to put a post out." So I put a post out, and it was received pretty well. And they had some really nice comments, and it was great to actually touch base with a lot of people who over the years, and like I boxed for 16 years from the age of 8 to 24, and I met a lot of fighters all around the world, and I got messages from a whole lot of them, and also obviously a bunch from New Zealand and Australia. But it was really it was nice. It was a little uplifting, and of course, Evander went on to become a legendary fighter, and one of the great, uh, definitely one of the probably one of the great cruiserweights of all time. You'd have to have him in your top two, probably him and Usyk, the two best cruiserweights. And he went on to become, four-time world heavyweight champion. So I have a lot of fond memories. It was a special time, and it's a time where I actually met my wife on the flight from Auckland to Los Angeles, and my wife was over there as a rhythmic gymnast. So we share a lot of memories on a day like this. But it had to be brought to my attention. It's not something that I actually thought, August the 8th. It's and of course next year is 40 years, and in fact I've had a lot of phone calls from Olympians in New Zealand saying we got it. It's 40 years for all of us. Those who were in the LA Olympics, and let's do something. So I'm thinking that something may be put together, and we might try to have some sort of reunion, which would be a real blast.
That sounds like a real blast indeed, and I'm sure a lot of stories will be told and shared between then. Great to kind
I'm
of
sure
hear.
I'm sure the stories have got greater year by year.
Sure they have indeed, Kevin. Um, Kevin, from the sublime to the disappointing, I guess, is where I want to start. Really, we were expecting to see Anti Joshua take on Dylan White in a rematch. However, Dylan White has tested positive for performance-enhancing substances, which has happened or recurred throughout his career in numerous occasions. What was your feeling on the situation when you heard that news, Kevin?
Look, really disappointed and really gutted. And boxing at the moment doesn't need that, especially a fight that was capturing so much of attention. Like when they first fought, it was a fight that mainly the British boxing fans were salivating about. It was a fight that had huge interest over there. But now the way things have developed and unfolded in both White and Joshua's career in the last couple of years, this fight again had huge significance because, I was looking at this fight and thinking, you know, both of them made hard work of Jermaine Franklin. Um, both of them are at a crossroads stage of their fight. Both of them have been referred to as fighters that are well past their best and one foot in the door on the way out. So the loser of this fight was going to be in a position where almost to become a gatekeeper and this will be their last opportunity to get a significant win, and a win that would once again resurrect their career. So I was looking forward to that, to two guys older in their careers, two guys who have both changed trainers, two guys who have changed their style a little.
And you're in full flow.
I'm sorry, my man.
No worries. No worries.
I tell you what I was saying. I feel a wee bit sorry for Dillian. Look, he's been tested a lot, and he's been very, very upfront. About his failings earlier in his career, and he's been tested by WADA many times in the last 4 or 5 years. He's not foolish enough to think that he can be on the PEDs and he's not going to get busted for it. I'm scratching my head at it, because I know it's a fight that it wasn't a fight that he had to take. It's a fight that he wanted. And especially these days, you can't cheat the blood and urine tests. You just simply can't do it. The scientific methods now have evolved to a state where you need to be a biochemist, and a genius biochemist to ever try and beat them. Mate, I'm a little bit bewildered that he tested positive for this, and I'm sure stories will come out afterwards. But look, the thing that I thought when that fight fell through, the obvious opponent style wise was going to be Derek Chisora, and it would have been a very easy make, and it would have been a fight that I'm sure Derek Chisora would have rubbed his hands together and thought, oh my God, at the age of 39, I'm going to get another big payday. And so he would have walked into that fight, and you would have thought, with the miles on Chisora and the tidings he's got by Fury and the second Parker fight, that it's a guy that Joshua should have felt very, very comfortable in fighting. And the fact that he's trained for 12 weeks to fight Dillian Whyte, a guy who fights in a very similar, aggressive, come forward fashion, and the fact that they didn't take that fight makes me wonder just how concerned the Joshua camp and Eddie Hearn are coming into this fight. Like, let's look at it. Anthony Joshua's won 3 of his last 6 fights. He's had 1 knockout win. It was like a TKO in his last 6 fights against Pulev. He has changed trainer 3 times. I actually thought, just while we're talking about changing trainers, I thought there was evidence of some good things with his work with Robert Garcia. In the second Usyk fight, he looked much better in the second fight than he did in the first fight. His first fight with Derek James, look, I know Derek's a decent trainer. There's no doubt about that, and he's a clever guy and he's scientific. Joshua can't be a boxer. He's simply, you're talking about a big, powerful, aggressive, come forward, damaging guy who made his name and his reputation by viciously knocking fighters out in an aggressive fashion. You can't all of a sudden, at the end of your career, say, okay, now I'm going to become a boxer, like he was trying to be in the Franklin fight. that is not going to get him back to a position where, he's going to be fighting for titles and getting his hand raised. I just don't believe that. I know this is the second fight with Derek James, and I actually, the first fight, it's always hard with a trainer, and it takes a bit of time for everyone to adjust and to get the chemistry and to be on the same thinking pattern as that trainer. But I think now the second fight, we'd expect to see a lot more off Anthony Joshua. But the fact that they didn't put their hand up to take the Chisora fight, I don't know if it was a combination of, okay, look what happened to us when we took a dangerous fighter and Andy Ruiz back in New York. I think they're being overly protective. But I also, I think Anthony Joshua has to get back to. I love the fact that he's using his jab, but he's got to get his power going off that. He's got to get the confidence of throwing that right hand and his uppercut again, because they're two of the weapons that made him such a menacing fighter.
Yeah, Kevin, a lot of routes I could take with your in-depth answer there regarding the whole situation. The one I want to go with that sticks out to me first of all is just your trainer's eye in terms of Joshua. And look, if you had him under your stewardship, what avenue would you take him to try and get him back to the top, which is where he's trying to go with Derek?
Well, look, firstly, I just like to say that I think that like Joshua had this relationship with Klitschko, and he studied Klitschko, and he saw what Klitschko did, Harry, and reinvented himself as a boxer after those 3 knockout losses early in his career. Well, this is not early in Anthony Joshua's career, and it's too late now to reinvent yourself. You can add tools to your game, but your game is aggression. Your game is power. Your game is physicality. You are a big, strong, imposing man, and you have to use those tools. Look, I love the jab. I love the double jam. The fight against Franklin, I sat there with a bunch of people and I said, I'm loving what he's doing with his jab. And I'm sure that has come from Derek James. Look, like Derek, I think the jab is the number 1 punch in boxing. It sets up all your power shots. It gets you out of trouble when when the other person is coming forward with aggression and looking to close the distance. The jab is, you must have a good jab to be successful. Look, even Mike Tyson had a good jab. A lot of people don't realize that, but he had a very good jab. I like the way he was using his jab, and if that was my call, I'd have him throwing the jabs, but I would give him the confidence to throw that right hand and to put his hook behind it or put the uppercut behind it. Because these are punches that really work for him. I think he has the perfect opponent, but as safe as Eddie has been in this fight, and as safe as Joshua's team has been, I would hate to think that knock Helenius out in 1 round and Anthony would go the distance. That would be an absolute friggin' nightmare. Like, he has to go out there and put the hands on him. Sure, Eddie's got to talk it up. He's got to say there's danger, and there always is an element of danger when you change an opponent at the last minute in a fight. And Joshua has, he has examples to go by. But this is not Andy Ruiz. This is not a young, dynamic fighter who had 1 loss on his record against Parker. This is a guy, Robert Helenius, who's at the end of his career. This is a guy who's been KO'd 3 times, brutally KO'd a couple of fights ago. The other thing, everyone knows, unless you're fighting in an amateur tournament, that you need, your body builds up and peaks for a fight. then you've got to taper off, come down, rest, recover, and then build back up again. You know, he's gone from fighting last week to fighting this week and saying it's the best I've felt. And, I know this is a big opportunity. And, the Nordic nightmare is trying to become Anthony Joshua's worst nightmare.
Kevin, yeah. So again, a lot said there. So a lot of directions I can go in with that. Just to put a close on the White situation. Look at when these sort of things happen, especially with White's past. There's not a lot of confidence from the boxing public that maybe they are clean or not. So they might not get that opportunity to kind of really kind of prove it to the boxing public. But you've given a different kind of perspective on it. Do you think the boxing public, look, if he does eventually clear his name, will accept that?
Oh, I just can't. For the life of me, who's been given so many chances, would be so friggin' dumb and irresponsible. That I can't believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I also I know that every fighter only has X number of fights in their career. And both these guys, I'm sure, have, when I say both these guys, we're talking about Joshua and White, both of them, their best days are behind them. But they can still fight in great fights, and there are fighters out there with big names, like Tyson Fury, like Usyk, like Wilder. There are fights there for both those guys. So I can't believe, for the life of me, that he would willingly do this, because it just throws it all away. Like, if you don't want the fight, just walk away from it. I hope he proves himself innocent. I hope he gets another opportunity, because there's a couple of great fights out there for him. There's Parker's sitting there trying to rebuild his career. He's had a couple of very, very easy touches, and he'll probably put his hand up and get a fight on Tyson Fury's card in Saudi. Fighting some nondescript guy. But there is a fight at some stage between him and Dillian Whyte. Both guys are past their best. Both guys are in a similar situation, and that's a decent fight in the UK.
Bit of a differing take that you have regarding Derek Chisora and the boxing public. Their concerns about Derek Chisora being in the ring again. He's taking on Gerald Washington, not Anthony Joshua. So do you understand the concerns that the public have regarding Chisora's future in the ring?
Mate, I'll tell you what, if it was my decision, he wouldn't be fighting. Full stop. He's had some great fights. He's been a fan favorite. He's a guy that everyone loves to see, but have a look at his last couple of fights. He's walking on his heels. He's stumbling around the ring. He got a terrible hiding in the second fight against Parker. Tyson just carried him for as long as he wanted to, because they're friends. And Tyson could have got him out, as we all know, in 1 or 2 rounds, but he decided to look after him, to give him a payday, and to be respectful to him. I don't believe he should be fighting now. I really, really don't. But look, let's have a look at who he's fighting. Maybe Eddie wanted to give him a win to go out. Gerald Washington, he has lost 5 of his last 6 fights, all by knockout. He hasn't fought for over a year and a half. Sure, he has a new trainer, and a good new trainer. Malik's been doing an outstanding job. He's done a great job with Wilder, and he's probably going to do a really good job with Gerald Washington. But Gerald Washington is, I don't know exactly how old he is. He's 40 plus. He was very late coming into boxing. And the fact that he has been out of the ring now for over a year and a half, coming off 5 knockout losses, I think it's a very dangerous fight for him. And you're telling me that the British public are saying it's a very dangerous fight for Chisora. God, I think that the paramedics better be there for both guys.
Moving
Look, I
on.
hope. Hey, look, I hope Derek Chisora gets a nice win,
Hmm.
and I think he will. I think he will have more left in the tank, even though he doesn't have the legs that he once had. Um, he gets the win and he retires because he deserves to. As far as Gerald Washington, uh, it's how hard is that going to be for Malik Scott um, to motivate a 40 plus year old fighter who's coming off 5 knockout losses? Very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. Um, but just to throw a spanner in the works, let's let's remember who Washington did knock out. Robert Helenius. I remember watching that fight, and Helenius was all over him, winning the fight comfortably, and one right hand from nowhere, clipped him, and that was the end of the fight. And I think the Washington's career at that time was practically done, and that gave it a little bit of oxygen, to put him into all these fights since. But now that he's had a year and a half out of the ring, I question why a 40-plus-year-old guy with coming off 5 knockout losses would want to be putting his body um, through something like this.
Going back to the Joshua versus Helenius fight, there was a fight featured on the undercard between Philip Hergovich and your geographical neighbor, I guess it is, Dempsey McKean.
McKean.
Dempsey gets an opportunity to take on Philip Hergovich, but an uphill battle, it would seem, potentially, Kevin.
I don't know. I haven't seen the odds, but I'm sure the odds are wide. Are they? Do you know what the odds are?
Not a betting man.
Okay. No, well, I'm not a betting man either. I've never ever had a sports bet. But one thing I will say is, this is look. Firstly, as disappointed as I was with Herkovich in his last fight, this is still a huge step up in class for Dempsey McKean. He's never seen anything like Herkovich in any of the previous 22 professional fights in his career. One thing about Herkovich, and many fighters that I've spoken to over the years have told me this, and I've heard this time and time again, that in the amateurs, by the way, Herkovich had international amateur fights, he had 26 knockout wins, which is not unheard of in the pros, but it's unheard of in the amateurs with the big gloves and the head guards and everything else. This was a guy that many fighters had told me who had fought him, that this was the hardest they were ever hit in their careers. So I know he has ridiculous power. I think they made a huge error with him early in his career when it was very, very difficult, because of the power that he does possess, to get him regular fights. People just wanted too much money to fight him in the early stages. And Eddie was putting him on cards where he was, the fights 3 or 4 away from the main fight, and the expenses were being absorbed. But I think the worst thing about that is he never got the development that he should have got, especially in years 2 and 3. There should have been some good stepping stone fights in there, and the fights were just blowouts. Because of that, Hergovich never took that next step up and never took the improvement that he should be at now. And I think all that came tumbling down in the Zhilei Zhang fight for the mandatory position. And I think it was a fight that everyone sort of thought beforehand, Zhang's old, he's 40 years old, sure, he's a southpaw, but who's he really fought? And he's gone the distance with a couple of B-class guys. What I think a lot of people didn't really factor in is that, he had some health issues over the last couple of years that enabled him not to have stamina later in fights, and this A lot of people took for Zhang that he wasn't training properly, but he actually did have health issues. And we've seen, in his last two fights at the highest level, against Herkovich and against Joe Joyce, the guy can really friggin' fight, and he's really, really powerful, and he's got actually a pretty good skill set, for an old guy. And that was a life and death fight for Herkovich. He did not at all handle the southpaw style. He was hit repeatedly. In fact, there were a couple of times in the fight where I actually thought he was going to get stopped and and take the mandatory position. But Herkovich got a close, controversial decision. I know that Dempsey McKean is a southpaw. I know that Zhang gave Herkovich problems. Dempsey McKean is not Zhilei Zhang. He doesn't crack like Zhang. He will not be able to get the respect that Zhang did against Herkovich. Herkovich, I think, he's too experienced. He is too powerful. The step up for Dempsey McKean is just too great. And at this stage of his career at 22-0, his team have done a fantastic job. They've got him into this position to fight for the world mandatory title. So good on them, but I think it's just a step too big.